In 1972, when Bill Ritchie was a professor of printmaking at the University of Washington, he was asked by Evergreen State College to write a shopping list of equipment for their new lithography printmaking studio. 15 years later, he was invited again, this time to teach the 4 printing methods: silkscreen, relief, intaglio, and lithography. His challenge was to show all 4 printing processes in 90 minutes, something he had never attempted. Following is the 4th in the series, recorded by a student volunteer and lightly edited for the viewer's convenience.
Okay, I am going to print now the 4th of the 4 printing processes, the lithograph or planographic print. In the other 3, you had ink going through a surface. In the second process, you had ink being printed from the high places on a surface of different levels. And then in the third process, you had intaglio coming from below the surface, from the textures under the surface. And on this one, it's all one surface. It's all flat. And the way image is maintained is the fact that we use water and grease on that same surface. The greasy parts are what you drew originally, and the non-greasy or the watery parts are the parts you didn't draw. And this, it sounds like a real puzzle at first to most people. And I have some very quick ways to show you that it really works. First of all, I will roll out this ink, get my ink ready. I've already worked it up. I've made it soft. The thixotropy was well set in, and I overcame all that and worked it out. And now I'm rolling out the ink on the litho roller. This is a roller, not a brayer. You could use a brayer for little tiny wimpy lithos and stuff, but we use something here that's 4-inch diameter, so it's a roller. Here's a 6-inch diameter roller, and you can use those for color. This is for black only. Leather is a good medium because it carries water and ink at the same time. It's kind of mysterious, but that's how it is. So I'm getting my ink all rolled out. Then I start this whole process of getting the stone damp and rolling on the greasy ink, and you'll see how it works. But I'm not quite finished rolling out my ink, so another few seconds here. Got to get it all uniform on the roller so that I don't get heavy places alongside of light places on the image. I always start out with way too much, and then I take off the excess with the ink knife. I need a pan of water in that yellow plastic there, and a sponge. And I left my sponge over by the intaglio press.
Use a sponge here.
Yeah.
So when do you use that?
Yeah, it's really full of grit, though. Yeah, I used it yesterday, and it was awful. So I'll ask for a cleaner one today. Thank you. Okay, the ink is all nicely rolled out. Yesterday I printed this same stone. I just took it off the rack over there, and it looks like a screaming head. And I don't know who did it, but it works just fine. Actually, the stones that are sitting around here, almost all of them have an image on them from somebody in the long distant past. And probably on some day they printed and got all done and put the stone in the rack and walked away. Ink sitting there and everything. That isn't necessarily what you would do if you were going to print the next day. But, you would do a couple other steps. So I just came in and just crossed my fingers, took a stone off the rack, started printing, and it worked. It's quick and dirty. Before I put the water on the plate, I'm going to soften that ink a little. The little bit of ink that I used yesterday. I'm going to soften it just a little with this solvent. There are roughly 5 solvents in a printmaking studio. This one is called lithotine. And in a lot of ways, it's just like turpentine. And the way to remember them is those last 4 letters, T-I-N-E, lithotine, turpentine. And they're interchangeable. The difference is lithotine is not hazardous to your skin as much as turpentine is. Turpentine is dermatitis city. Use that for very long, and you're going to have dermatitis for many, many years afterwards, oil painters have learned the hard way to substitute other things for turpentine instead of using turpentine, or terps as it's frequently called, in a mixture of oil paint. Has started substituting to overcome that problem of developing allergies and dermatitis from too much exposure to turpentine. But if you had gloves on and for some reason you didn't have any lithotine, turpentine is interchangeable with what I'm doing here. All I've done now is kind of remove some of the old ink, soften it up, and I'm ready to start the washout. Yeah, this is the dirty stage.
Oh.
Yeah. It's water now. And it's just like magic that comes up, you know? But it isn't magic, it's science. And it's true, again, and anytime you're using a printing process that requires rolling on the ink, you usually build up the ink layer slowly. And the first proofs are virtually throwaway proofs. They're always too light. But you kind of go into the process with that in mind, that you start out light and you build up. You build up the tones. Another reason for doing proofs, building up this way, is to get the press ready, to get the pressure adjusted so it's just the right pressure. And when you're starting out learning what does what little lever does what. Oh, the fan is to blow away the extra water. You don't want all that extra water in your plate or on your paper. Then the printing paper, in this case, it's trial proofing paper, newspaper, newsprint, and a second sheet, which is called the make ready. And the reason for that second sheet is so there's no friction directly on the paper you're printing on. Under the part of the press here is a greasy strap of leather wrapped around a piece of hardwood. And that's to give us the right pressure that we want at the right width. The scraper, it's called the scraper bar. And it's just as wide as a stone, just about the same width as a stone. And of course, to keep the grease off the paper, you have to use the tympan.
That bar, Bill, that you said could break the stone?
Yeah, that's right. If I had one of these big wide stones and just a little narrow scraper bar, the pressure in the middle of the stone pops it. There's a big rack over there of broken stones. You're looking at about probably $1,000 worth of broken stones. Charge people for breaking them.
What is this called?
Well, you don't drop them, and you don't use scraper bars that are too narrow.
Oh, so you can take that one out of there?
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, they're interchangeable. Yeah, there's a thumb screw. I didn't mention, you take that scraper bar out when you change stone sizes.
So.
How much did you say a press like this cost?
Today, this press is about $3,200. Evergreen bought this press in '72 and hired me to set it up in '72. It was upstairs. And so this press and I are, you might say, old friends.
Is that white plastic coating one?
I'd have to look on the shipping. It's an exotic plastic of some sort, but even plexiglass would work pretty well. There's proof number 1 for this session, and proof number 2 will probably be a little bit darker. Now somewhere, I don't know where I put them. Oh, here they are. Proof number 1 and 2 from yesterday. So if my job as a printer was to print off, 200 of these images, the first thing I do each day is pull a couple trial proofs and then start printing. And I would study each one. I use a little magnifier, what they call a loop, and I'd study the progress. Is the pencil under there somewhere?
This?
Yeah, that'll be okay. Is there a regular one? Oh, that's okay. Any of those. And I'd label it. Okay, today is This, what month is this? January. The 6th, 89, and this is trial proof. TP 1. I mention that because if you do lithography and you want me to teach you, you have to document everything you do if I'm not here, standing there watching you. Because you'll have a problem one day or another, and I can solve the problem only if I know which proof this is, in what sequence, what you did, and so forth. So documentation of lithography is crucial to getting answers to questions about what went wrong. Of course, if nothing goes wrong, you never ask, and it doesn't matter if it's not documented. You have the proofs, and that's all you need. So I always warn people that there's a kind of technology to lithography that's very exacting. You know, there's a little science here. There's drops of acid to think about, and whether your gum is acidified or not acidified, and whether it's true gum or not. And you know, it seems like a lot of chemistry. And in fact, maybe it's a bit like photography in that regard. Now, the question comes up, how does it work? How do you get the drawing on in stone and so forth? So I'm ready to show that to you in a very quick and dirty demonstration as the basic principle, and actually a little history of lithography, which is kind of fun. But I have to have a clean stone, a stone that doesn't have a drawing on it. 2 of them right here. Great. I'll take the little one. This stone weighs about 80 pounds, and you're not supposed to carry it. Well, if you've got someone who can carry a 80-pound stone without, crushing a disc in their back or getting a hernia, you have them move your stone for you. I'll get more into safety later on. Yeah, there's a forklift for the purpose of moving big stones. I'm just dusting it off because it's been sitting around a long time. This is probably a stone that hasn't ever been drawn on since the last time it was ground and grained. The stone is ground to get rid of the old image, to erase the old image with a coarse grind. And then when the old image is gone, it's grained to give you the kind of tooth that you might want. You want a fine-grained stone or a coarse-grained. Then you do the graining. The way lithography works, limestone is calcium carbonate and magnesium and a few other things, I don't know, minor, trace minerals. But it's mostly calcium carbonate and magnesium. When you take a greasy drawing pen, and they make these crayons called litho crayons specifically for drawing on stone and aluminum plates, they put a grease content, wax, and lamp black in it. Lamp black is so you can see it, and the grease is the real worker. The oleo, let's say greases, oleo margarine, okay, whatever. The greases in the crayon react with the carbonates and the magnesium the instant you draw. The very instant you draw, there's a chemical bond, and it results in a product called oleomanganate of lime. It's a new product. It's like in chemistry, it's an equation. So as soon as I've drawn on here, I'm creating all these reactions. When it was discovered, they tell an interesting story about the discovery of lithography. This man named Sennefelder is a Bavarian, somewhere between Germany and Austria, living there. They quarry this limestone for floors. It was floor covering, right? And they take it down to thin slabs and polish it and make floors in expensive homes, palaces, and so on. So this man Sennefelder was a songwriter, and he couldn't get his stuff published. This is 1775, somewhere around in there. Couldn't get his stuff published. There's no Xerox machine, and no one would pay to have his stuff engraved in metal. So he decided to invent his own printing process. He tried Xerox, but couldn't find any power. All the power was out. So he dropped the Xerox idea and started trying for etching on a cheap material, stone, limestone. Plenty of it around. It's pretty cheap, easy to get. He figured that if he could etch his music scores on this stone, he could score. So he had this around his place, and the story goes that one day he had to come up with a list either for his groceries or his laundry. I can't remember. Maybe it was a laundry list. Didn't have paper because at those days, not only was there no power, there was no paper just laying around like it is today. Paper was still handmade and quite expensive. So he wrote his laundry list on the stone. That took care of that. Went back to his little invention and said, oh, we'll wash this stuff off of there. And what happened was he couldn't wash it off. I mean, the pigment came out all right, but he could not get it off the stone because he didn't know what had happened was oleomanganate of lime had been created here, and you can't wash it off. It's insoluble in water. Well, he thought about it, and I guess he was far enough along in his invention that he knew that if he could strengthen that image enough, that he could draw an image, strengthen it, and then etch away the stone. And he'd have a method to do his music scores. So that was the procedure. That was the invention of lithography. If you turn your head just right and get some glare, you can kind of tell that this is repelling. It isn't really dramatic, but it's sort of repelling the greases. The water repels the grease from the roller, but the drawing remains receptive to that same grease, that greasy, sticky, oily ink. Well, the story goes on that he kept trying to make etchings this way, relief etchings, and it never worked out. Finally, they figured out that you don't need to. You can just print what you have. And that was the invention of lithography. So the rest of his life was spent trying to go around getting a patent on it. And I don't remember whether he ever did or whether his heirs did. And then there was some question that a Frenchman really invented it because it was pretty much happening at the same time. And the big push was printing on fabric. They were doing a lot of T-shirts. And they needed something they could print on fabric. That's called the throat. Yeah, the ideal thing is that the bar is just like a ½ inch or a ¼ inch shorter on both sides. That's the perfect. And a good studio has scraper bars incremented for every inch. And then, they surveyed the stones and they said, yeah, this will work, and you get a whole set, like 20 scraper bars. I haven't gone through that yet. That will be the equipment team's job to help us with that question. Now, that's a thicker stone than the other one. These stones are all different thicknesses because they've all been used for different lengths of time. So they've all been ground down. So they're all different heights. So I've got to take the pressure off a little bit for this stone. Now I'll take a piece of paper. I guess you know what's going to happen since you've already seen a printing demonstration. You know I'm going to get a drawing off this. So not very thrilling. A piece of paper. I'm kind of curious myself because, you see, I've seen a lot of different ways to teach lithography. I've taught lithography a different way. And I enjoy this one the most because it's sort of instant print. It's like instant gratification. You get results right now. The fact is that if you study lithography and learn to process the stones, there's a lot more to it. There's a lot of processing. I can only make about 3 prints from this stone before it starts to fill up. The line gets bunchy and clusters and clots up together, and it's not very beautiful. You can make about 3. If I start processing the stone, putting some gum arabic and a little drop or 2 of nitric acid, makes it permanent, and I can make 15 or 20. Even then, it'll start to bunch up again. If I do that twice, I can get 50. See? So the craft of lithography is usually devoted to getting as many prints as you can that are all alike. Pretty light image, but you believe it now that it works. So again, when you do the plate making, the drawing, it has to do with the printing, of course, but I wasn't emphasizing that today, but this sort of shows you why lithography works. So there's a lot of chemistry, some chemicals going on there. Now you've seen the 4 printing processes, and remember they're essentially mechanical. I could take, if this turned out, or if the screaming head turned out, I could print that on paper that's suitable for etching, and I could go over there and I could print an etching right over the top of it just by dropping it in the water, getting it soft, blotting it off, running it through the press with an etching plate. And then I could go down the hall after the plate was dry and screen print over it. Then when I was all done, I could put rubber stamps all over it. So I'd have 4 processes. So remember that these are all mixable. So even if you choose to emphasize one process for a while, it's not like a terminal decision, because there'll be chances to combine them. It's quite logical. Okay, it's noon.
Bill?
Yeah.
What about
Yeah.
bombs?